Lawyers of Reddit, what is the pettiest reason you've ever seen for divorce? Story 1. A client and his wife came in regarding a real estate transaction. At the end of the consultation, the client casually stated that he would like to divorce his wife. I was stunned. The wife started crying. The client started rubbing his wife's shoulder and told her that everything would be okay. That was an awkward few minutes. Story 2. Nobody ever believes me about this one, but it's true. A man wanted a divorce from his wife because, and he gave this example as the last straw, his wife ate those nasty pumpkin Halloween candies. Like candy corn but pumpkin-shaped. He had been looking forward to them all day, and when he got home, she had eaten them all. He snapped. Swear on my life this story is true. Story 3. My father-in-law and mother-in-law's breaking point was when he threw a breadcrumb at her from across the kitchen. The divorce took 4 years to settle. Story 4. The weirdest I've ever seen is a coworker of mine. His wife saw a picture of him at a pool when he was in high school and really athletic, toned, muscular, tan and so on. Over the 10 year after high school he stopped lifting and lost his muscle tone and just became skinny. She told him she wanted him to get back to working out because she really liked the way he once looked, and he said it was something he missed doing and agreed to get a gym membership. He was going to the gym 4 days a week but was only really working out for 2 of them. On the days he didn't work out he would sit in the sauna to get sweaty, watch Netflix and then go home. When she asked about him going to the gym and accidentally let it slip that he was fudging workouts twice a week, she apparently found that to be a deal breaker and filed for divorce. Story 5. I had a client who with his wife were into a computer game like The Sims, only more X-rated. I think it was called Second Life, where you have an avatar and can interact with other people's avatars. He suspected his wife of, through her avatar, hijinks and made his own avatar to stalk her in the game. Sure enough, her avatar was doing the dirty with some dude's avatar. That was it for my client. Story 6. I'm a lawyer but not that kind. However, my brother's 4th wife divorced him because she found out the ring head used was originally his 3rd wife's. They deserved each other. Story 7. Wife wanted divorce like 2 months into marriage because the husband would squeeze the toothpaste from the top and not bottom. She claims to have told him a million times over to stop. Would have been easier to get 2 toothpastes, I thought. Story 8. Lawyer but not a family law lawyer by trade. Not sure if pettiness was attached, but one contributing reason to a divorce I saw was that mom wanted her son to play soccer and dad didn't. Story 9. Not a lawyer. My mom's coworker divorced over dishes in the dishwasher. The wife would get so frustrated over the husband coworker not rinsing dishes before he loads them in the dishwasher. To compromise, they bought a super nice, top-of-the-line dishwasher. Solves the problem, right? She yelled about the dishes that night. He filed for divorce the next day. Story 10. Not a lawyer but this happened to my wife's cousin. Her husband came home one day asking her to give a higher financial contribution on the groceries. Because she, as a lady, was using more toilet paper than him, she took it as a joke and had a good laugh. He got mad and asked for divorce. Worth mentioning that his salary was 3 times higher than her one. Story 11. Not a lawyer, but apparently my brother divorced his wife when McDonald's forgot to put barbecue sauce in with her chicken nuggets at the drive-thru and she asked him to go back and get some. He didn't and then I guess she started smashing up food and throwing it at him out the window. So yeah, McDonald's, how could you ruin a marriage? Story 12. Ethel Merman divorced Ernest Borgnine after about a month because he often would Dutch oven her. She wrote a biography. The chapter about her marriage to him is a single blank page. Story 13. Not me, but a family member who is an attorney had someone call her day 4 of the lockdown saying I have been stuck with my wife for 4 days, and I need a divorce. Story 14. My first internship in law school was at a family law firm. Did work on one case where a couple divorced after 48 years of marriage. The guy said he finally got sick of her cooking. Story 15. Not a lawyer, but I have to say my divorce was kinda petty. She decided a year and a half after she kicked me out she should divorce me because I didn't come crawling back to her. Funny as she realized too late that when she kicked me out, she didn't have any income. Story 16. Friend's wife is a marriage counselor. She had this couple coming and trying to work things out before a divorce. The husband went non-stop on why he wanted the divorce. She said 2 incidents really stuck with her. The first was the husband was doing some yard work and asked the wife to carry some twigs he trimmed from some bushes. He grabs a huge stack and lugs them over to the pile he was going to mulch. Wife just grabs a couple of sticks. He asked if she could carry more than that and she picked up a couple of more sticks. She said the husband emphasized the word couple. The second was the wife told her husband that they had finally gotten to a point in finances where they could buy a new vehicle. The husband said he was excited and sat down with his wife to price vehicles. The husband said every one he showed her was out of their budget. He became extremely frustrated and asked what the budget was. She replied $2,000. That was the tipping point for the divorce. Story 17. I left my husband because he nah babe, I got it, ed me constantly but would never do it. Last straw was him letting our power go out in July when we had a heat wave and my sick dog was stuck in the heat. Story 18. I decided to divorce my first husband when he complained about me buying lunch at McDonald's. He had called me at my office, asked what my lunch plans were, and I said I was meeting my friend Kelly at McDonald's. He started complaining about spending money for restaurant food and that I should have packed a lunch from home. We had just that past weekend bought him a new pair of ski boots that cost over $100. It was the final straw. I was unhappy about a few things that I could have overlooked, but to be lectured about spending $600 on a burger and fries was just too much. I let him for a few minutes, gently hung up the phone, walked into my manager's office to quit, went home and started packing. Story 19. I know a couple that divorced Donald after less than 6 months married because the guy started farting around her, not like at her but just not holding it in around her anymore. Story 20. Not a lawyer, paralegal. Someone came in for a divorce because their soon-to-be ex changed the password on their phone. Plaintiff had always had the code to get in, but now they didn't. Divorce time. Story 21. I'm not a lawyer, but I've heard of a breakup between a couple because the GF said that their zodiac signs were not compatible and therefore they couldn't be together. Story 22. The husband could only eat hoagies if they were nailed to a table, so they mostly ate at home where it was okay for him to damage a table, but once time during a road trip stopped at a deli, he had the nail gun with him and nailed the hoagie to the table so he could eat, so she divorced him after the vacation. Story 23. From my experience, if something petty is the stated reason, there's usually a lot more to the story. One of the pettiest reasons was when my female client believed that her husband loved his mother more than he'd ever love her. Now, I'm going to answer a different question. What was the craziest reason for a divorce? Glad you asked. Me client female was convinced her husband was having an affair. He worked some construction job but always came home smelling great. She finds texts from his work friend Bob where they are planning some late-night pipe repairs. Well, this is the South. There is no such thing as gay here, so she believed that him and Bob were just working late. My client feels awful. She thought her husband was cheating, and clearly he wasn't. He cared so much about her that he worked with Bob all through the night. He even cared so much about her sense of smell that he'd even shower so she wouldn't have to smell all the, pipe cleaning stuff. She feels so bad. She takes him to dinner. He asks her if she wants a drink, and she sees him walk off to the bar to get their drinks. Most thoughtful husband ever. Well, a minute turns to 5, to 10. Finally she decides she has to find him. She looks everywhere, then realizes that she didn't check the men's room. She's afraid her precious husband is sick. She jiggles the door open. Her husband was on his knees, but he wasn't sick. She caught him giving a stranger a at the bar. On their date, to make up for the whole "sorry, I thought you were having an affair" thing. The reason I know this in such detail. She wrote a 7-page front-back letter detailing everything her husband ever did, thought about, or even looked like he thought about. Story 24. This was a couple of years back, but I had a client which divorced because they made a bet to whoever reaches the highest level they can in Coinmaster, and the wife lost 500 and they divorced after a shitfest of an argument. Story 25. Definitely the fridge story. A woman filed for divorce because her husband would eat everything he can find in their fridge whenever the wife was out for work, so she came back to an basically empty fridge each night. He also cheated on her, but she was less angry about that. The fridge was what pushed her to the point she wanted a divorce. Story 26. I remember one episode of a TV show here in my country. Similar to Jerry Springer, the woman didn't know her husband used dentures until marrying and living together. She said she couldn't handle anymore. She was disgusted. They both cried. She said a lot of "I'm sorry," but she couldn't go on. They were married for a few months. Don't know if it was true though. Story 27. My aunt used to work as a divorce lawyer. The worst one was a couple fighting over a hamster of which took so long the thing died before they were settled. She said it was a bargaining chip to win favor from their children. At that rate, just buy another hamster. Story 28. Luckily it was not a marriage yet, but a friend broke off a 5-year relationship and an engagement in an argument over Panda Express. Their relationship had been strained and he had just moved to a new city for work. During his lunch break she calls him and asked where he was eating. He says Panda Express and she's like, "You Panda Express, you eat that every day?" No I don't, I might have it once a week." "No, you eat there like every day." Then he hangs up on her and they never spoke again. Story 29. I once had clients who got a divorce because she wanted to buy a condo in Naples, Florida. The petty part of the story is that combined their lawyer fees would have bought a very nice condo on the water in Naples. Story 30. I know a guy whose fiancée nearly called off their wedding because he forgot to disinvite his attractive single female friend. They eventually got divorced over it. Said friend was a part of a larger co-ed friend group. Apparently, the guy in the story was designated driver one evening out when his fiancée was out of town and dropped everyone off at home one by one. He apparently dropped this particular friend off last. Logistically it made sense on the route he took. She lived closest to his house, but that meant that they were alone together in the car for 8 minutes. They have zero romantic history together, nothing happened, and they barely interact, save for when they are gathered as a group. His fiancée became highly suspicious of him, and she was convinced something happened between him and the friend, despite him calling as they left the bar, and 30 minutes later when he arrived home alone they have a doorbell camera, which she was watching. She asked a bunch of questions about what they talked about at the bar, when they were in the car, and what was said when the two of them were alone. She then casually said she doesn't want her to come to their wedding. He agreed to disinvite her, but he forgot to, and just thought the whole thing would blow over. Well, wedding day arrives, and she shows up in an Uber XL with 4 or 5 members of the friend group. The fiancé can see guests arriving from the bridal suite and throws a full-on tantrum when the friend arrives. The wedding planner locked the bride, groom, best man and maid of honor in their hotel room and told them to work it out. They did not work it out. The bride wanted the groom to tell her to leave, and he tried to point out that would cause way more of a disturbance than if they just let it be and pretend she didn't exist for the day. Wrong answer. The best man eventually got a hold of the groom's phone and called the friend and explained the situation. She left the wedding and hasn't spoken to the groom since. The wedding took place 45 minutes late while the makeup person was called back to fix the bride's makeup. They eventually split after the groom realized that the accusations would never end. Everyone was suspect. His co-workers, his friends' wives, her friend. She couldn't talk to any other woman no matter how harmless the conversation without her getting suspicious. And yes, we all thought she was cheating on him. We made the mistake one time of bringing this up and he became belligerent and attempted to fight everyone, so we left it alone and we'll never know. Story 31. A woman came in wanting to divorce her husband. He had just gotten a new job and a pretty big raise. It turned out that this new job of his also required that he work from home, but he was working in an office before. She was having an affair with her next-door neighbor, and him being home more meant that she couldn't cheat on her husband easily. That was definitely a twist. I was expecting something like him being the one having the affair, but nope. Story 32. Not a lawyer, but one of my philosophy professors, now ex-professor, and his wife got a divorce because he tried to exorcise her. The Christian school didn't take it well, and he is no longer a professor there. Well, actually, the couple was getting a divorce due to the wife having a year-long affair with a professor of the rival school across the street. The attempted exorcism didn't help matters, though. Edits and several people seem interested. The exorcism didn't work, according to said professor. The couple got a divorce, the professor got some custody of the kids, got screwed in the money matters, and now his ex-wife and kids are moving to Ohio. I guess the thing with the rival school's professor didn't work out for the ex-wife, while his oldest daughter is preparing to go to the school he used to teach at this fall. Poor girl has to pay her way now, when she planned for most of her life on going for free. The whole story was pretty big for a while at school. The professor went to jail illegally for like a month without any accusation against him because he answered a phone call from one of his super young daughters. His wife had filed a protection order for herself, not the children, and the campus police took him away, even though he didn't answer the call on campus. It was a whole scandal and the school was involved way more than it legally should have been. Super weird stuff. According to this professor, the president of the school was demon-possessed and that accounted for the whole thing. It gave a portion of the student body something to covertly argue over for a couple weeks. Story 33. My ex thinks I divorced him because my friends told me to. What actually happened was I was bitching about him to a friend and she said, you know, he really is a passive-aggressive piece of garbage. He does this all the time. And then I started thinking about how he really did pull that all the time and how I wasn't actually depressed. I just hated living with him. She opened my eyes, but I divorced him because he treated me like, not because my friend told me to. Story 34. Someone's husband insisted on bringing their mother to their honeymoon. That's when the wife realized his mother was still breastfeeding him. I don't think it was a petty divorce, but I think the man is petty. Edit. He also made his mom go to court with him. My guess, he was thirsty. Story 35. I'm currently reading A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson, where he walks the Appalachian Trail. He heard a good one from a hiker concierge that gave him a ride to the start point. He dropped a guy off with the most expensive gear he'd seen, who made it just 3 days to the first payphone before calling for a ride and flew home. It wasn't what I expected. A week later, he shows back up for a ride to the start. His wife wouldn't let him quit after so much financial commitment. Again, he calls for a ride from the payphone, but this time does not fly home. Story 36. So I got married at 18. Same story as most. Shitty home life. Needed desperately to get out of the house, so I married the first guy that came around and stayed with him until I was 22. I was working one day and he didn't answer any of my texts or calls. Eventually I got an answer and before I could even say hey, his response was, "What do you want?" in plain Call of Duty. I left him a week later. Most of time, the petty reasons are just the straw that breaks the back. Story 37. Not divorced, but annulled on their wedding day. I've told the story a few times on Reddit, so long story short, time she told him several hundred times that if he smashed the cake in her face at the reception, it was over. He did it. She walked out and had it annulled the next day. This was over 30 years ago. BW. Story 38. Not a lawyer, and this doesn't exactly fit, but my dad told me he divorced my mom because she didn't do the dishes and keep the house clean. I was 15 and a messy kid. He wanted me to do all chores before he got home. When I was 18, my mom informed me that he was supposed to watch me and my brother while my mom was in the hospital. He decided to go to a bar instead, left me unattended with a child molester to be babysat, then got hella drunk and cheated on my mom. She caught him cheating and divorced him, then demanded full custody with supervised contact after finding out I'd been left with and molested by said pedophile. He was my mom's dad and she was under extreme pressure by her family to let him see me and my brother, but she had been careful to make sure another adult was always there, be it her, a sibling or her mother. My dad knew what he had done to my mom when she was a kid and still left me with him. Story 39. Not a lawyer, but met a mechanic at a bar in Botswana who was apparently a superb fixer of broken vehicles. He seemed quite normal, although a bit twitchy after the 10th brandy and coke. He then told me that he had loved his wife but couldn't handle the way she used to cross-thread the lid of her contact lens holder. I nearly killed her but was persuaded to leave her. Story 40. Not a lawyer, but worked in education. Had a father that informed me Kevin's mom was no longer in the picture since she couldn't learn how to squeeze the top paste properly. He wasn't joking. Confirmed by the son. The father is serious about things like that. Yikes. Story 41. I'm not a lawyer, but this nearly happened between my parents. My dad was threatening to divorce over a window, and not just any window, but my 22F bedroom window. He asked me to open it. I said no because I'm not comfortable with it open. One huge screaming match later, I was left feeling guilty as my mother cried because Dad was threatening divorce and looking to move out. We couldn't afford it. We can barely afford where we were renting now. Thankfully Dad realized how stupid he reacted over a window after a few days, but now I'm on my toes around him. I'm scared that if I refuse over something like that again, he will actually leave. Story 42 NAL. But I know someone who claims she divorced her husband because he wouldn't quit smoking he smoked before they were married. Turned out she was cheating. Story 43. Not a lawyer, but I figure my divorce attorney thought my ex-wife's reason was pretty petty. He refuses to get rid of his cat and the dog we adopted together. Story 44. My mother is a divorce lawyer. She said the wife divorced because the husband could only got off grocery costs. Literally thought it was a joke or code for something. Turned out she came from a tight budget family and thought he was so wasteful with his paycheck when he bought ribs once a month. Story 45. Not a lawyer, but I heard some gossip from my neighbors that apparently one of their relatives couldn't stand their wife's cold feet at night, and it got so bad that they each took turns sleeping on the sofa. The couple couldn't afford a bigger space and held it off for so long because of fear of ruining their reputation. Now they're divorced and looking for people with tolerable body temperatures. Story 46. Not a lawyer, and this wasn't the real reason, but my mom told me at the time, 3 years old, that she was leaving because my dad snored too loud. That's what stayed in my head for many years later until my sister finally figured out what happened. Story 47. The examples in this thread are all just incidental. It reminds me of a school report where a bullied kid gets written up for screaming and punching their bully of 7 years cause the bully called them breath, and the adults in the room refused to look at the larger context wherein the breath comment was no significant in and of itself. Story 48. My client's wife asked for a divorce after he refused to pay $52,000 per semester for their daughter to go to the private high school the wife had gone to as a child. Story 49. Hubby's issue with the wife was that she went on a trip alone before they got married, also, that the wife wore a swimsuit and posted a picture on her FB. Story 50. When I was in college, I worked with several guys who said that planned to go into their marriages with the intent of treating their wives poorly after the kids arrived, so they would be divorced dads, i.e. all the fun and none of the responsibility, or even disappear from the kids' lives and then make the big hero dad comeback when they're teenagers, so they party with them and maybe even bang their female friends. They would also talk about ditching the first family so they can devote themselves to the second one. Don't think it works that way, dudes. I don't think they were kidding either. One of them had said that his family had to live briefly in a homeless shelter after his own dad left. And I asked him, why would you want to do that to your own kids? And he replied, Dad had a 17-year-old girlfriend head desk. Story 51. My dad listed that my mom alluded to him being a homosexual as one of his reasons for divorce, and considering he's a far right-wing homophobic church fanatic, and it was the year 2019, I just love that being a reason on legal paperwork just so much. Story 52. These kind of posts only reinforce my very happy single, no roommate life, been married, lived with others, and I finally see the light for me. If you're happy in your partnered life, I'm happy for you. Story 53. I have read and been told more than once by people who work in the field that about half of the couple who get divorced are simply so mismatched. It's a mystery how they ever had any kind of relationship in the first place beyond anyway. Story 54. I keep reading all these small petty reasons, but they're obviously just excuses. BC, they already had their foot out the door for whatever reason, and needed the excuse or breaking point. Story 55. AM. A divorce lawyer. I don't ask the reason for divorce, because they don't need one, and during the initial consult, I'm usually getting information about the party's income, assets and debts, and then later, spending my time scolding the clients for not getting me documents. My state has no grounds for dissolution other than irreconcilable differences. Story 56. Once I had a client, a middle-aged woman from a rich borough of London. She filed for divorce after her husband refused to use the toilet with the window open for a period of 3 months. She was prepared to settle at what he wanted, but that seemed like the most pressing concern. She also said that he insisted on sleeping in a cold room and that sealed the deal. Story 57. Not a lawyer, but I know of a case where a woman divorced her husband because he didn't shave his nose hairs for a vacation trip. IRC, it wasn't even visible. Story 58. He wasn't Catholic. They got married with him not being Catholic, but she decided after that she really wanted to be married to someone Catholic. On a side note, all these people need to live together for a minimum 2 years before getting married, would save them a lot of trouble. Story 59. This young couple back in 93 to 94, so this newlywed wife not only divorces him, not only leaves him penniless, not only ruins his business, not only shares herself having with another man over the telephone, not only flees to another country, France, but leaves him unable to even retreat back to his home country of Poland. I believe he truly loved her, and why did she even divorce this guy? He had erectile dysfunction, and of course this was brought up in front of everybody in the courtroom. Never saw him after that, but apparently he got into a boating accident not long after. Never been less envious of someone. Story 60. Brian Doyle has a really good essay about this in which he gives a bunch of different reasons he's heard, including tired of her husband's farts, wanted to watch all 60 episodes of The Wire in order, nosepicker, wanted to only be married every third day, or so. Story 61. I'm not a lawyer, but my now ex-stepmother walked out and filed for divorce after she logged into their shared alt Facebook account and saw black bimbos on it. After looking at it with my dad, I realized that she must have seen the People You May Know tab. The account had 0 friends and was used to spy on her daughter, and it's likely those recommendations were based off of the people her daughter were friends with. We all pretty much agree that she wanted to leave but didn't want herself to look bad in front of her friends. Yes, my family is now much happier with her out of our lives. Unfortunately, she has dragged out the divorce and everything will probably be finalized right before the 2-year anniversary of their separation. We rent our home and she did not have custody of my younger brother, so it should have been super simple, but of course it wasn't. Story 62. This takes me back to my friend's weird ex. She left him because her male friends were less attentive and didn't buy her free drinks anymore after she got married. Naturally it was his fault. Even more hilarious is when he found someone else 9 years later and she was pissed because he was supposed to wait until she gets her head straight. SMFH. Story 63. I need my lifestyle maintained, she said, but she also said and he was deployed and I didn't get what I wanted from him. Meanwhile she got engaged to 4 different men, married to 2 and 5 more kids. Story 64. 2 people broke up because neither of them wanted to change the toothpaste tube. I never thought Crest cavity protection could cause so much damage. Story 65. I have seen that a person married her love and then fell to relocation depression being the trailing spouse and then filed for divorce. Story 66. Okay, not divorce, but we were engaged and on rocky terms. My final straw was coming back from a trip from Florida. She had put a half-eaten chocolate bar in the back floorboard of my Jeep, where it lay melting. When I discovered this, I called her out on it, an argument ensued, and ultimately she found herself out of my vehicle. Overreaction, maybe, but no regrets. Story 67. I once asked a couple who came into my office to do estate planning if they were married. One of them said yes, the other said no. Turns out the one who said yes had just moved out on their spouse 20 years before, moved in with their new partner and never formalized anything. There were no children. I told them this needed fixing. We fixed it. It was not as easy as it should have been. Story 68. Money is always going to be a good reason for divorce. Usually not a good thing for the most part, but there are still other issues that have to be put in consideration. Story 69. I'm not a lawyer, but I remember my 2nd grade teacher telling my class she got divorced because she didn't like her husband's last name, which was gross. The last name was literally gross. This probably isn't true and she probably just told us that because she didn't want to tell us the real reason why. She was also a teacher to my 8-year-old girl with severe undiagnosed ADHD. Story 70. I remember my aunt divorced my uncle because he was just her starter husband and apparently she was eating her partner's like difficulties on a video game. Story 72. I'll just leave this here for no reason at all, and because all life is random and non-linear. I'm Christopher Nolan. None of you will believe me and I'm okay with that. And my answer to this question is actually another subthreaded. Can a person get first divorced before their first marriage? Is marriage a set of steady-state relation harmonious congruences over time, and if not, can the causality be reversed? Please know that I wrote all of this in the future perfect. You thank Chris Nolan. Goodbye. Story 73. Okay, this is a story. I swear on my neighbor's child. Man walks into my office irate that his wife has eaten a cat. I inquired, are you kidding me? To lighten the mood, man looks at wife. She looks back, they burst out in laughter. Then she says, okay, we're joking, we really just wanted to draft a Form 137 that we need to file. I am a lawyer but have no idea what a Form 137 is. I don't want to feel dumb because of overwhelming imposter syndrome. So I say, oh I'm sorry, we don't do that here, and they walk out. Not done yet. The man comes back weeks if not months later, walks into the office, and says, you are hysterical, heavily accentuating the hiss, bursts out in laughter. Farts almost sounded artificial, like a phone sound, and walks out. Then he walks back in, says, oops, I forgot to say excuse me. I'm perplexed how somebody could be so strange, so I walk out after him into the parking lot and start small talk. Turns out, he and his wife weren't actually meow-read. They just exist in this story to allow me to share some lame cat puns. Did any of this really happen? It's possible it is, but I might be telling you a tale. Story 74. Oh my god, that poor woman. This guy sounds like he was either a full-blown sociopath or just had zero social awareness. I mean, it sounded like he was surprised she was sad about being blindsided with a divorce in a realtor's office. Story 75. I knew a couple she found out in front of the banker. Never understood exactly what, but he wanted to separate their joint household account for business reasons. Paperwork was drawn up and he left enough in the account for expenses. They arrived at the bank in separate cars. Sign here, good. I'm filing for divorce this afternoon. I've contacted a realtor and the house will up for sale tomorrow. He got up and left. The banker was stunned. She had a panic attack meltdown. Some tellers stayed with her until they felt she was able to drive. He apparently was doing some stuff with offshore bank accounts found out during discovery. They've been divorced 4 years. Story 76. Was it credit related? I've heard of some couples having to split up to afford a house due to one having terrible credit and bringing down the score of the other. Story 77. I believe it. I contemplated leaving my husband 2 days ago because he ate my last box of gluten-free Oreos. He doesn't need gluten-free Oreos and they're sold out very regularly near me and difficult to get without ordering online, and they're expensive, and we have a food budget that only allows me to get a box, maybe 2, every month. I eat 1 Oreo with a 13 RD of a cup of ice cream at the end of every day, if I have enough gluten-free Oreos to do so, and it's the only sweet thing I eat anymore. He has other snacks, and can go buy himself regular Oreos anytime he pleases with his own spending money, but he had to eat my treat that I literally rationed down to an Oreo or less a day. I contemplated a lot of things. Divorce was only one of them. Edit, there was almost a whole box left. Story 78, I believe you. I think it had more to do with how inconsiderate the wife was because she would not even try to control herself and leave some candy for him, most likely knowing how much he liked them. She must have done this a lot. So I totally support the husband's decision to divorce. Story 79, aka, I'm done enduring a situation where I take care of everyone and in return you give zero shits about what I want. I think we are going to see many variations of this here. Story 80, after the first two sentences, I was convinced that he was going to divorce her because she liked those gross candies. Then, the twist, they're both demented people who like to eat gross wax candy. Story 81, lol, I mean my last straw was when I was on a 3-hour drive with my ex, and when we stopped to switch drivers because if he did more than half the driving it would be, like, such a miscarriage of justice. I grabbed 2 Oreos from our snack supply. He asked, do you really think you need those? Obviously there were a ton of reasons to divorce him, but that was my okay, this moment. Story 82, you are right. I don't believe you and I have said GTFOH to my phone at least 5 times in a row after reading this comment. Edit, after about 5 more TFOs towards my phone and an hour of reflection, I have reached the thought that someone could never make that up.